And according to the CDC, the #1 cause of death for children ages 1 to 19 in this country is gun-related violence. Data from the University of Michigan also shows gun violence increased dramatically from 2020 to 2021. Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas is here with more about the epidemic of gun violence in the United States. Hi, Pierre. You and I have to talk about this all too often. What's the latest on these figures?
Well, after a slight decline last year, Tuesday's tragedy is sadly more evidence that mass shootings are surging again. There have been 131 mass shootings with 4 or more people wounded or killed so far this year. That's compared to 113 at this time last year. So far this year, 502 people have been wounded and 193 have been killed in such attacks. We're seeing houses of worship, homes, the workplace, stores, restaurants, and sadly, schools are very much on the list of targets too.
Pierre, are there any patterns that stick out from the data?
I think the main thing we see is that it's pretty much across the board. All the places that we once held as secure and not likely the kind of places that would be subject to attack have now been attacked. We see the church in Charleston where those black parishioners were killed. We see the Jewish synagogue. We saw a movie theater where so many people were killed. We saw the supermarket in Buffalo where people were killed. And schools, as I just said, are sadly on that list that we regularly see having these types of incidents. I think the bottom line is that in the last several years, mass shootings, which are still a relatively small part of the overall shooting numbers, have been on the rise, and they've now gotten to the point where they happen with enough frequency, particularly in public places, that it, basically makes everyone have this feeling of anxiety that it could happen anywhere, anytime, any place.
Now, we see after these events in the political sphere, this always ignites a conversation about whether we need more gun regulations in this country. What are the conversations in law enforcement circles after events like this?
Well, I think recently what you hear law enforcement talking about are 2 things. One is they are very concerned that in many cases the shooters have more firepower than maybe the officers showing up at the scene. Number 2, they are increasingly focused on the intelligence. Can't we get more information about these shooters before they act out? What they find when they do analysis, and the Secret Service, FBI, and other organizations have looked at many of these mass shootings, they find typically that there are warning signs that something was said or done, behaviors were being exhibited that suggested that the person was going to a darker and darker and perhaps dangerous place. And they have to figure out a way to couple that kind of information with the information that that person who's descending toward a dark place just went out and bought firearms. Because what they would see if they could have everything in focus before this would happen is that something bad was about to go down and that these people were basically ticking time bombs.
Pierre, it's so frequent in these cases that in hindsight we look back and we see these warning signs, sometimes what law enforcement call red flags. Does it feel like we're making progress in trying to somehow isolate and prevent these events before they happen?
We don't know. There is some data that some departments are being more proactive and seeking out people who are in crisis and doing things to mitigate and stop them from conducting attacks. Every few weeks or so, we get information about a thwarted attack, and sometimes people say, well, would the person really have done it? But what we see now is when you don't act, many of these things come to fruition, and I think there is a lot more work being done by, as I said, the Secret Service and FBI to try to get a handle and really study these kinds of cases to see what we have unfolding. Overwhelmingly, it's men that are conducting these types of attacks. Yesterday's attack was unusual in that it was a female who conducted the attack. But sadly, I think we're going to find out once we hear about what was in the writings. And while the writings might not say, oh, I'm going to such and such a place on such and such a day and do whatever, we should be able to get a sense of what this person was thinking in the days leading up to this.
All right, Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas, we appreciate it, Pierre. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.